So today we're going to do section 1.6. I just wanted to mention that some of you guys are absolutely rocking it with MyLab. You're getting in there, you're spending time, you're learning, you're doing well on your homework and your quizzes. A few of you might make a mistake here and there, but for the most part, you are doing really, really well. You're going to do well on your test if you keep that up. Others of you are absolutely rocking it with ChatGPT. Or some other form of doing the math, because you're able to do that quiz in 3 minutes and your homework in 15 minutes. So you guys, you keep rocking it with ChatGPT, you're not going to rock it on your test, okay? And then others of y'all aren't rocking it either way. I sent y'all an email, so. Anyway, first thing I want to do is I actually want to do a few problems that I'm going to add. It will help you guys with the rest of the section. So here is the first problem I want to do. Notice that it has 4 terms in it. Okay, so I'm going to be factoring. And it has 4 terms. So you need to know how to factor by grouping. Haven't gone over that in class, so I just want to make sure that you remember that. So I'm going to take the first 2 guys and I'm going to factor out anything I can. So I'm going to factor out an x. So I've got x plus 2 left over. And then the second group looks like a 5 is in common. So I'm going to factor out a 5, and I will also have x plus 2. So do you notice that you have 2x plus 2's? So you took out the greatest common factor from the first 2, greatest common factor from the second 2. Now we're going to take out that x plus 2, the greatest common factor from the whole thing. So I'm going to take out the x plus 2, and I will have left over x plus 5. So that's how you factor something that has 4 terms. I'm going to do one more that has a little trap in it. So this is 3x squared minus 12x minus 4x plus 16. All right, I'm going to do the same thing. Group the first 2 together. Looks like I can take out a 3 and an x. So I have what's left over is an x and minus 4, right? If I distributed that 3x, if I distributed that here and there, I would get 3x squared minus 12x. All right, now when I start to take out the next thing, I know that I'm going to take out a 4, right? They've got a 4 in common. But the question is, what kind of 4? Well, I really want this to be a positive x. I want it to be x minus 4. So for that to be a positive x, this has to be a negative 4, right? So negative 4 times x will give me negative 4x, and then negative 4 times negative 4 will give me this positive 16, right? So once again, I have something in common. So I'm going to take out the x minus 4, and then what I have left over is 3x minus 4. So we'll be using that later on in this section. So I just wanted to remind you of that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, hold on, we're going to keep going because that is all stuff you should already know. All right, so here's objective number 1. Again, if this video does not make a lot of sense to you, then you can go into your homework, click on objective number 1, and watch these problems being worked by someone at Pearson. Okay, so notice that I have something times something equals 0. So if you remember the 0 product property, that means either this guy, negative 3x, is going to be 0, or this guy, x squared minus 16, is going to be 0. So I'm going to set them both equal to 0 and solve it. So when I divide by negative 3, I'll get a 0 here, so that's one of my answers. Notice this has an x squared. So I'm going to get 2 of these guys, and there's different ways you can do it. You could factor this into difference of squares. I tend to do that a lot, but I taught you solving it by square root property. So you could just add 16 to both sides and take the square root of both sides, and you'll get x equals a positive, or a negative 4. So we actually have 3 answers because we had 2 x's here and another one there, so that was an x to the third. All right, here's another one. Notice I also have x to the third on that one. Okay, I need to set it equal to 0, just like I would have if it was x squared. So I'm going to add 5x squared. And when I do that, I'm going to write it in descending order. X to the third, then my x to the squared, and then my regular x. All right, now I'm going to solve by factoring. The first thing you try to do is to take out the greatest common factor. You notice it all has an x in common, so I'm going to take an x out, and here's what I'll have left: 3x squared plus 5x minus 2. So I'm going to set this guy equal to 0, so that's one of my answers, and I'm going to set this guy equal to 0, and notice it is squared, so I'm going to factor that one as well. So I'm going to just, I love to do slide and divide, so that's my go-to. You do not have to do slide and divide, but I'm going to slide that over. So I'll get x squared plus 5x minus 6 equals 0. I'm going to factor that. So my 6, that's either 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. I need it to subtract. To get a positive 5. So that's going to be these guys. Those will subtract to give me 5. So I'm going to get a 1 and a 6. Put my x's. I want it to be positive, so the big one's positive. Now I've got to divide by what I slide. Remember, slide and divide. I'm going to divide by my 3. So I'm going to wind up with x minus a third and x plus 2. Remember, I could, if it makes you feel better, you can set those equal to 0 like that and then subtract. So you can do it that way. Or you can just say, oh, I know it's going to be the opposite. So I know that's going to be a positive 1/3. So we actually have 3 answers. And that makes sense because we have x to the third. So if you have x to the third, you'll have 3. X to the 12th, you'll have 12. We're not going to work in x to the 12th, but you get the idea. All right, here's the next objective. We're going to talk about quadratic equations. We've already mentioned that before. When it's in quadratic form, it's ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So it's in descending order, and it's set equal to 0. So one of the things about this section is we're going to leave a bunch of these unworked because I did not put any of those in your quiz or your homework. So we're just going to work this first one here. But notice it is 2x to the fourth. Okay, it's 2x to the fourth. So I'm going to split that into, I'm going to think of it as 2, let's see, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to treat it as slide and divide. Sorry about that. I'm going to treat it as slide and divide. Even though it's x to the fourth, I'm going to take my 2 and I'm going to slide it over here. So I'm going to get x to the fourth minus 11x squared plus 24 equals 0. Now I'm going to factor it. Now this is where it's a little bit weird because you've not done x to the fourth. But all I'm going to do is take x to the fourth and split it into 2 pieces. So that's going to be x squared and x squared. Okay. And then I do the same thing with my 24. I'm not going to split it, but I've got to think of what multiplies together to get 24 and adds to give me 11. So we've got 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 6, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. That's our factors. What's going to add to give me 11 is my 3 and my 8. So I'm going to put 3 and 8. And the number I slide, which was 2, is the number I divide. Remember the signs of these, They're going to add to give you, a negative. So they're both going to be negative. Let's keep on trucking. So we're going to have x squared minus 3 halves. And then we're going to have x squared minus 4 equals 0. Okay, now I'm going to set each one of those equal to 0. Okay, just like we would if that had been just a regular old x instead of x squared. So I'm going to have x squared minus 3 halves equals 0, and x squared minus 4 equals 0. And now I'm going to use the square root property. I'm going to move that guy over. X squared is 3 halves. Move that guy over. X squared is 4. I'm going to do the last one first because that is like the easiest. Okay, so when I take the square root of that, that's going to give me x equals plus or minus 2. So I got two answers. Now when I take the square root of this one, I'm going to get x equals plus or minus 3 halves. And I would love to say that we're done, but we're not done because of that dude that said you can't have square root in the bottom, because you can think of that as the square root of 3 over the square root of 2. So now I'm going to multiply. I'm going to rationalize the denominator. If I multiply the square root of 2 times the square root of 2, remember that's just 2. I'm not allowed to have that 2 on the bottom, right? Or the square root of 2 on the bottom. But I can have a regular old number on the bottom. So I'll get x equals plus or minus square root of 3 times square root of 2 is just square root of 6. Square root of 2 times square root of 2 is 2. So we've got these two answers and those two answers. And that makes sense because we have x to the 4th. All right. Now this one, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, it is tricky. It is tricky. It's sort of weird. Okay. You notice I have a square root. Okay. So before, when we had a square root, we said if we could get the square root of something equals a number, then we could square both sides and get rid of the square root. So I'm going to sort of do that. I'm going to get the square root by itself. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides so that I'll get the square root of x minus 1 equals x minus, 7? Okay, now to get rid of the square root, I'm going to square it. Okay, so whatever I do to one side, I've got to do to the other. I told you it's a little weird. So I'm going to get x minus 1 on this side. And over here, I'm going to do this. Whoops, I'm so sorry. I meant to highlight it. There we go. So we're going to do that out to the side. Okay, so x minus 7 times x minus 7 is x squared minus 7x minus 7x plus 49. So that's going to be, x squared minus 14x plus 49. All right, so we have we've got something squared. So that means I want to get everything on that side. I need to make it look like a quadratic formula. So or quadratic equation. Subtract x here and add 1 here. And you can do that in 2 separate steps if you would like. X squared minus 15x plus 50. All right, and let's see if we can actually factor that at all. So I know that my 50, I've got 1 and 50, 2 and 25, 4 doesn't work, 3 doesn't work, 5 works, 5 and 10. Oh, I think it's that, because it's got to add to give me 15. So let's put it in here, x and 5 and 10. It's got to add to give me a negative, so they're both negative. So this answer is going to be 5, and this answer is going to be 10. So normally I would just circle it and be done, but we've got a square root. Sometimes when you have a square root, things don't quite work out. So we're going to check both of these. So let's check x equals 5. And by checking it, I'm just going to plug it in to the very top problem, right? The one at the very beginning. So that's going to give me 5 minus 1 minus 2 equals 5 minus 9. So this is what, 4? So the square root of 4 minus 2 is, what's 5 minus 9 is what, negative 4? I'll just go ahead and simplify that. Well, this is going to be 2 minus 2. So does 0 equal negative 4? Nope. So that means this guy does not work. Okay, now we'll check 10. Let's see if 10 works, because we might have a no solution problem. If neither one of them work, then it's a no solution problem. So I'm writing down the original and putting, I'm going to put my 10 in it. 10 here, just like I put my 5 here, 5 there. All right, so that is the square root of 9 minus 2. What's 10 minus 2? 10 minus 9 is 1. So the square root of 9 is 3. 3 minus 2 is 1, and that works. So x equals 10 is a solution. What is an extraneous solution? That guy. It's extra. It doesn't work. I've mentioned that in the past. We've had a few extraneous solutions, right? Why is it important to check your solutions when you have radicals? Radicals are square root. It's because sometimes they don't work. Sometimes you get extraneous solutions, extra solutions that don't work. Okay? That might be hard to read. That's extra. All right. Okay, now this one, we are going to omit this one as well. Omit. You're not going to have anything like that on your quiz or your test or your homework. So here's another one. Notice this time I've got the cube root. The cube root. So it's just like the square root. I need to get this thing, this cube root, all by itself. So I need to move that 3 on the other side. I'm going to do that by subtracting. So the cube root of 1 minus 4x is equal to negative 3. Okay, remember when we had square roots of stuff? Square roots? The way we undid it is we squared it. So guess what we're going to do to undo a cube root? We're going to cube it. So we're going to cube that thing. So I'm just going to be left with 1 minus 4x on this side. And then this one is just negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. Well, 3 times 3 times 3 is 27, and I've got 3 negatives, so it's going to be a negative. So it's negative 27. And now we just have a regular old Algebra 1 problem. I'm going to subtract 1. I'm not really subtracting, right, because my signs are the same. So I'll get minus 28. Divide by negative 4. So my x is 7. Now before I circle it, I need to check it just to make sure. So I'm going to write down what I started with and put the 7 in there. My plus 3 equals 0. So I was grabbing this and instead of x, putting my answer. Let's see what we get. Let's see if we get 0. So that's going to be the cube root of 1 minus 28 plus 3 is 0. That's the cube root of negative 27 plus 3 equals 0. Well, the cube root of negative 27, remember what that's asking, is what times itself 3 times gives me negative 27. Well, we have it right there, right? Negative 3. So that's going to be negative 3 plus 3 equals 0, and that's true. So my answer is 7. All right. Now, that is all we have for 1.6, but 1.7 is very, there's a lot in 1.7. So what I want to do is just do a little bit of the factoring by grouping, which again is part of the things that you need to know. But while I have you here, I'm going to go ahead and work a couple of these in the things that you need to know. We're going to come on down here to factoring by grouping. So we're going to work that guy. Whoops. I'm just going to work 2 more problems. Okay. So factoring by grouping. So I'm going to have this guy. And by the way, you really do not want to miss next week because section 1.9 is a little bit, I think you're going to need a teacher to teach you that. Let's just put it that way. I think you're going to need a teacher. All right, so I'm going to factor out what those guys have in common, which is an x squared. Notice I started with x to the third. So if I start with x to the third, how many answers am I going to have? I'm going to have 3 answers. Okay. So that's going to be what's left. X squared times x gives me x to the third. X squared times 1 gives me x squared, positive 1. Okay. Now, I want to get an x plus 1 in here, right? I want these guys to match. Well, the only way to make those guys match is if I pull out a negative 1, right? Because negative 1 times x gives me negative x. Negative 1 times 1 gives me negative 1. So that would work. Equals 0. And now I have my x plus 1 is what those guys have in common. And what do I have left over? I've got x squared minus 1. Well, x squared minus 1, either you can factor it or you can use the square root property. I keep using the square root property, so I'm going to go ahead and use just factor it, okay? Just to be different, to show you that you can do it different ways. So this is going to be x squared minus 1 equals 0. Well, that's a difference of squares. So that's x plus 1, x minus 1. So I'm going to have x is a negative 1 and x is a positive 1. So we have 3 answers. What do you notice about those 3 answers? 2 of them are the same, right? So really my answer is going to be negative 1 and positive 1. So we have an extra solution, okay? Now right now that doesn't mean anything to you, but later on when we start graphing, it will mean something about the graph, okay? I'm going to do 1 more problem and then you will be done for the day. All right, so I've got this guy. So x to the third minus 3x squared minus 16x is negative 48. So first thing I want to do is set it equal to 0. So I'm going to bring that guy over by adding 48. I left the x off. That would have been bad. So I'll have plus 48. All right, now there's 4 terms. So I'm going to try and group them. Notice those guys have an x squared in common. So I'm left with an x, because x squared times x is x to the third, minus 3. All right, so that means over here, I want to get an x minus 3, right? That's what I want to get over there. I'll do it in a different color. Let's do it in orange. So we do this guy. So I want to get an x minus 3. So that means if I want to get x minus 3, I need a 16 here. I need a 16 to get 16x, but I also need that negative. Now notice that negative 16 times x gives me negative 16x, and negative 16 times negative 3 gives me a positive 48, so that works out great. All right, so let's see what they guys have in common. Notice they have an x minus 3 in common, and then I'm left with x squared minus 16. So this one, your answer is just x equals 3. So I know I have that one. And notice there's no square root, so I don't have to actually plug it in. That's a true solution. And then this one over here, again, you could factor it into x plus 4, x minus 4, or you can take that 16 and move it to the other side and take the square root. And you still get a positive 4 and a minus 4. So I have 3 answers, and I started with x to the third. So I should have gotten 3 answers. Okay, so make sure that this weekend or before this weekend, you do section 1.5 and 1.6, all of the homework and both quizzes. Okay, if you do not do well on a quiz and want to go in and take it again, you need to go to the study plan to do so. Also on Friday from 10 to, I'll write that down, on Friday from 10 to 11 a.m. in the TLC, Friday at the TLC. They're going to talk about the quadratic formula and word problems. So if you need some help with that, they are available on Friday. All right, I hope you guys have a great weekend.